Love is a very sweet place to be if you don't mind company and a little bit of mud sometimes. Yeah, for we are connected at the source, and life will take its course and move us into unity. I feel a family growing based on love and trust. We've such a flock of angels watching over us.
This morning, compassion is Science of Mind Boot Camp. Last week, it was Science of Mind Boot Camp, compassion. Really matters not. But for just a moment, moving away from the word compassion, and I'd like to focus on a different word and get your input. So when I say boot camp, what does that mean to you?
Sounds military.
Military, yeah.
Sounds military. Okay. So let's go a little deeper than military to.
Sounds like exercise.
Okay. Okay, let's go a little deeper in terms of the symbolism of boot camp, what it does for us.
Someone's in charge and you're just kind of forced.
Oh my, okay.
I like it very well.
Okay, all right.
This is my opinion.
Let's go a little deeper.
Exercise.
Okay, come on, you
That's the
guys.
image of boot camp.
Well, my boots are all
Getting
kind of
fit.
flashy, so.
Okay,
Stretching yourself.
I would say
stretching yourself.
it's a set amount of time where you're really going to drill on one thing.
Okay, all right.
It's intense,
It's intense.
focused.
It's focused. Anything else coming up?
It's looking for outcome.
Okay. Well, let me give you some of my definitions. And when I've given this talk before, here's some of the things that came up from the people and some of my perspectives about boot camp is back to the basics. Getting down in my soul, reaching down into the deeper depths of my abilities, self-discipline. Self-discipline in actuality, in the way that I'm seeing it, self-discipline is self-love. In spiritual teachings, in the science of mind, where I come from the place that that whatever is out picturing in my life and in my reality is an opportunity, especially if it's something that that I'm uncomfortable with, that it's an opportunity for me to grow. So boot camp, from a spiritual metaphysical point of view, can be an opportunity to grow, to expand my sphere of availability. Because if I was in a spiritual boot camp, or if I went to a meditation retreat, or if I went to a workshop or a type of a boot camp that was asking me to reach down into my soul and to access and become aware of aspects of myself that I had not been aware of, and to use them for good. So that when I speak the words, as Bobby did in the treatment, about I am the power, that becomes much more than a word, that there is an energy behind that word. I am the power. And I know where that power comes from, because as it has been spoken, there's only one life. That life is God. And one of the qualities and attributes of that life is power. So are we afraid of our power? How do we use our power? Where can we expand in our consciousness to dig deep into our soul and to draw from an inexhaustible realm of power that is never, ever depleted? And a power that, like the Buddha, is peace. Through the principles and the practices of the science of mind, that's what we have to offer. First and foremost, to ourselves. And I want to remind you, I want to share again, when I was here last month, I shared with you a quote by Dr. Holmes from Living the Science of Mind. And it is this: in the science of mind, we do not say that everything is all right when everything is wrong, or when something is wrong. We do not say peace when there is no peace, but rather we discover, we turn within and we discover what is wrong and why I do not have peace. Why I do not have power. We do not say that people are not poor, sick, or unhappy. But what is ours to do is first to ask the question, why these things should be perfect, or why these things should be so, if the original cause of all things, that one life that is spirit, that is God, is harmonious, perfect, radiant, happy, and free. Now let's juxtapose that with a book that that I was introduced to recently by Thich Nhat Hanh, and the title of the book is No Mud, No Lotus. And Thich Nhat Hanh says, oh my, there are so many books on happiness and joy. He says there are so many books, and we're bombarded with this through spiritual teachings, that he says at times we might feel like when we look at our life or the things that come up for us, our reactions in our lives, we might feel like we're doing it wrong. We might feel inadequate. We might feel that we don't measure up. Because, as he says, we still, and we always will, experience unhappiness, and a term that he uses, suffering. And then he goes on to say that, difficult as it is to accept, he says, there is no realm where there is only happiness. Now, I had to think about this. I had to kind of take the totality of my being and explore that in my own mind to see, can I totally wrap myself around and embrace that idea that there's no realm where there is only happiness and no suffering. So let me just say that as far as the afterlife or any other realm other than this realm on earth, I'm going to leave that over there. I'm going to hold out for the possibility. that there is a realm, whether you call it heaven, whatever. But here on earth, and we know through the teaching of science of mind, that we don't believe in a place. You know, you sin and then you go to a place called hell, or you live a good life and you're kind and you do the best you can. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you, as the teachings of Jesus so clearly profess. That then we're going to go to this place called heaven and everything is going to be actually, you know, wonderful. Well, I don't know about that place. I'm sure I've been there at some time, but my consciousness, but I'm here. And I want to know how to take these principles to create the best life, the best day, the best experience, the best relationship that I can in every moment. And I suspect that you want that as well. So, if he says, and I'm going to accept it, that there's no realm here in this human experience where there is only happiness and no suffering, then what are we going to do with that? He says the art of happiness is also the art of suffering well. To suffer well. So, suffering well means to me, one of the things that it means to me is that when I look at these inevitable experiences in my life that I may be suffering, that I go, wow, right in the middle of that experience, there's coupons. I want to get my coupons. I want to look a little deeper, as Dr. Holmes says. I want to go within and I want to ask myself, what is it I'm believing here about this experience? And remember, the other thing that Dr. Holmes says as we delve into this celebration, the 100 years of the science of mind, is that when we look within to discover what we're believing about something, that as soon as we begin to bring that up to the light of our awareness, our conscious awareness, it begins to dissipate. Especially when we have this practice of knowing the truth of my being that never changes. The truth of my being that never changes, that's the boot camp. And so we can't have one without the other. On the windowsill over my sink, in the tiniest little vase, I cut these 3 little flowers. Don't know the name of them. They were pink around the edge, brown in the middle with little yellow spots. And, you know, every time I'm at the sink, they're like this far from me. Well, lo and behold, every time I looked at them, or each day, I started to notice that they didn't look as good as the day before. They were changing. They were morphing. They were drying up. The color wasn't as vibrant. They began to shrivel. They got to the point, and as I was noticing, I thought, I'm just going to leave them here and watch and see what's the symbolism here. No mud, no lotus. And where did these flowers come from in the first place? And so I thought, wow. I thought of your compost container on your sink. Icky. Out into the garden, being this rich fertilizer that is necessary, the gunk, the mud, to manifest new food, new life, beauty, opportunities, a greater expanded way of seeing things. By the time I was ready, which was just yesterday, they were there like 2 weeks, to dispose of these little flowers, I could take them in my hand and crumble them almost to nothing. I wouldn't have thrown, they weren't so nothing that I would throw it on my floor, or just leave it on my counter. I did put them in the trash. And I knew that they were gonna end up in the mud. So it's just, it's amazing to take the symbolism of nature and the earth to our own personal growth. One of the things that Dr. Holmes frequently would talk about is the idea that our thoughts are seeds, and that within the seed is the soil, the infinite potential, everything that is necessary to unfold and demonstrate the seed. The seed is the idea. The seed is pure intelligence, just as are my beliefs. Whether they're beliefs in lack and unhappiness as my lot in life, versus the idea that my current lot in life is the mud out of which I can produce a lotus flower. And that with every prayer treatment, with every conscious planting of the ideas in the fertile soil of infinite mind, that I can trust that process and the intelligence of my beliefs to manifest in the highest and best way for me. And if it's the highest and best way for me, it's also going to be the highest and best way for my family and for the family of humanity. Because the qualities of God, the qualities and the attributes of spirit are life-giving. They are joy, they are peace, they are harmony. So that I am like a tree and you are like a tree planted and rooted in the power and the peace and the presence that you are. Now I want to share with you a story that, and excuse me if I don't pronounce his name exactly correct. I know somebody that can. Yes, so Bill Yoon, Edward, Reverend Doctor of the Santa Rosa Center for Spiritual Living. And so when he talks about ordinary goodness, the goodness that he's talking about is the compassion that we all want to manifest. It's ordinary. It's, it's something that's already within us. But we have to do our own personal boot camp in order to access it. And there's never an end to our ability to access it. So he's talking about the growth of his own awareness and his own consciousness in not reacting, in seeing the good in all situations. But where he's finding the challenge and the mud is having to draw from within himself in order to see that and to react to it. So he's in the midst of his process, which he talks about in the book is an ongoing process. It's our spiritual practice. And he says, that his communication skills were still being refined, had not been refined, excuse me, by his study of nonviolent communication. And I had not learned yet the art of speaking mindfully. I sometimes acted in the way new converts to a diet or newly converted non-smokers occasionally do. I overstated my point of view, and in my case, with unkind words. And I insisted that other people master the integrity or the kindness or the honesty that I was aiming to access. No matter that, I was not yet able to embody these qualities. I still insisted that other people comply with them. Now here's the story. I was waiting on the pier for the ferry to return, day visitors back from Catalina to California. Before me was a little slice of paradise. There they were, all those coral-loving fish in the beautiful clear water, close enough to the surface to be seen. The scene, one that could be featured in National Geographic, was magnificent. Then I spotted a potential offender. A man leaning on the same railing as I, smoking. In my mind, I imagined how the scene would play out, and he obliged. He approached the end of his smoke, and as I had predicted, he threw the still smoking butt into the ocean. My mind flipped back and forth between intruding on someone else's life and advocating for nature. I was ready to let an outraged and indignant response burst into a loud voice. "Hey, you! What do you think you're doing?" I was going to say. I rehearsed my reprimand in my mind for a few seconds before speaking. I hesitated because I understood that an already problematic situation was possibly going to even get worse when I acted out of integrity with my stated claim that I was a kind-hearted person. Can you relate? I felt pressure to come up with something to say that was kind and also addressed the perceived wrongdoings. I did not want to avoid my responsibility, and I did not wish to act out of integrity with my newfound value of kindness and compassion. I took another microsecond to examine if my planned response matched how I wanted people to know me in the world. I asked myself, what might be the most beautiful way to address what had happened? My preference to disturb no one was butting up against my inclination to take a stand for the environment. I took yet another microsecond to think of the dramatic and powerful illustration when Jesus met with the people at the city gates, where they were about to stone to death the woman who had committed adultery. He said to them, "Let the one among you without sin cast the first stone." I refer to this piece of wisdom frequently to temper my indignation, not to relieve me of the obligation to speak, but to prompt me to consider situations in which I act the same way as those I'm accusing. Moi? In this way, my activism is enhanced because I get to see myself as part of the situation and not apart from it. This softening of my perspective doesn't weaken my position. Rather, it opens the doors to the conversations that are closed when using a more accusing approach. But that day, the Jesus story wasn't soothing my ire. I was feeling outraged, and my outrage was guiding me to scold the litter bug harshly. This deep internal process I was in lasted mere seconds. Where am I? And while I was in it, somebody else next to the man leaned over and with a smile whispered to the butt-flinging tourist, "Oh, the fish can't eat that. It's harmful to them." Because there was something genuinely kind in his smile, the comment seemed more like a private conspiracy between friends than a stern reprimand. Had I not been standing so close, I might have missed the private exchange. The smoker nodded sheepishly, looking around to see who had heard the words and mumbled, "You're right." The kindly rebuker probably achieved a much more than I ever would have if I had let my anger and my frustration flare up and cast the first stone. I try to remember when I am frightened and indignant and self-righteous, to act in the name of goodness. The fish can't eat that. Oh, you're right. And then standing and viewing all of this is Dr. Edward, knee deep in the mud of his own self-righteousness, and yet the desire, the inquiry within himself to acknowledge that he was not feeling peace, to acknowledge that he knew within himself that he really didn't know how to approach this. And to sit in the awareness of that mud and wait for the knowing. To find the compassion within himself, his own ability to discover and be in the mud. Life is a paradox. I believe that in the teaching of the science of mind anyway, because that's the one that I know well, that we do have a tendency to gloss over the mud. I know from my own personal experience that when I am willing to be in my own discomfort and inquire, what's going on here? What am I really believing about this situation? Dr. Holmes coins it simply when he says the biggest fear of humanity is that our needs will not be met. And so Thich Nhat Hanh asks us to acknowledge, to embrace, and to work towards self-understanding of our own suffering. He asks us to look beyond simply satisfying the feeling, which is, "Hey, you, what are you doing throwing that cigarette butt?" The feeling comes up and it wants to express itself just like it is. Look beyond simply satisfying the feeling and look into what belief is driving those feelings. One of the most powerful things that I ever learned, not through science of mind, through therapy, was this. Christine, you can feel, you can have any feeling you have, and it's okay. You have choice whether to act on it. Now that's powerful. And I don't know about you, but when I start going back into my life, and I remember back to the places and the circumstances when the feeling meant an action, because I was feeling it. But what if we're willing to do our own personal boot camp? To go within and to be with the feeling, to acknowledge the feeling. Yeah, I'm feeling this anger. Or to state it, even more, I am really pissed off. Or I am really scared about this. To love and have so much compassion for myself that I can embrace that. That I can say, Christine, it's okay. It's okay to have those feelings. There's lotus. There are beautiful flowers and new opportunities in that. Those are my coupons. So here's the steps. Recognize your feelings. Begin to do your own personal boot camp, where you make it a greater priority in your life to feel your feelings, to know what you're feeling, to not disassociate. Because that's what I've discovered in myself. That sometimes when the feelings come up, that the knee-jerk reaction is an immediate disassociation. Now, in a positive way, I could call that compartmentalizing. But the compartmentalizing says, I hear you. I feel it. It's okay to have that feeling. I'm not going to act on it now. I'm going to be with you in a little while about that. Compassion. Recognize your feelings. Embrace them. And then be willing to do your boot camp and look into the roots. What's activating this? What fear? What false beliefs? A belief in limitation of any kind, a belief that I'm not enough, a belief that something is going to hurt me or take something from me because I'm not up to it. Look deeply into the roots and then begin to do the work of letting go of the habits and the false beliefs that feed the suffering. This is what Tikhon meant when he said, the art of suffering well. Suffering in a conscious way. Suffering in a way that is compassion to myself. And if that's my pattern and my habit that I'm developing in myself, you can darn be sure that that's going to outpicture from you out in the world in your relationships. It's called life. This thing called life. So I invite you, if you feel comfortable with it for a moment, to close your eyes. And using the words of Jesus to remind each one of us that we are the light of the world. And that the truth of our being, the light of the mystic Christ, that is our divine birthright, that is alive and well within each one of us, gives us the strength and the power and the wherewithal and a sense of deep abiding peace that allows us to stand in the mud and to know that this is a part of our creative process. That within the mud there are vital nutrients, that there is wisdom, that there are seeds of truth and compassion, first for ourselves. That as divine beings we have been created with choice. And that the more conscious we are of the totality of our feelings and our emotions, that we are empowered with choice. And so we learn to take that nanosecond to breathe, to feel our feet on the floor, to know that the energy of our physical body, that energy is like roots down through the soil of the floor or the dirt that we stand on. That our energy circles around and comes full circle, that there is no place that God is not within this awareness. That everything is one. And that I am empowered with compassion and self-love first by my divine spiritual birthright. And so God is, I am. What more can I say? I am, and it is enough. Because thou art, I am. From out of the depths of me, I am. In and around me, I am. Over and through me, I am. O inner being, eternal and blessed, complete and perfect, birthless and changeless and deathless, I am, and ever shall I be. And so it is.
So it is. Woo.
Thank you. Oh, sweet. Thank you.